From Proverbs 21, if you close your ears to the cry of the poor, you will cry out and not be heard.
From Deuteronomy 15, give liberally and be ungrudgingly when you do so, for on this account the Lord your God will bless you in all that you undertake. Open your hand to the poor and the needy neighbor in your land. From Isaiah 1, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow.
From Isaiah 58, loosen the bounds of injustice, share your bread with the hungry, bring the homeless into your house, give clothes to the naked, and your light will break forth like the dawn. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer, here I am.
Friends, as we seek to apply these words,
Our New Testament lesson comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 34 through 40. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, come all you that are blessed by the Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of those who were members of my family, you did it to me. The word of the Lord.
Hello. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Gabby Crossan, and I'm the daughter of Jack and Denise Crossan. I've been attending Hudson for my entire life, and over the years, I've had the opportunity to grow closer and closer with God. This would have never happened if it wasn't for reaching. This past summer, I went with the youth on a mission trip to Costa Rica. While we were there, we met the most interesting, amazing, and hardworking people I've ever known. The people we were working with didn't live in the best part of town. They live in what they call the slums, which means close, narrow houses with metal roofs all packed tight together. They live without the guarantee of food or clean water, but that doesn't affect their outlook. Somehow these people are the happiest people I've ever met. They're so grateful for the things that they do have and don't care about all the materialistic things that we value so highly. Their positivity was contagious. One interaction that particularly stuck out to me was one I had with one of the sons of the woman we were building a house for. We were at the work site, and there wasn't much for me to do. I could tell that the kids were bored too, so I went over to the older one, who was about 7 or 8, and said, hola. It wasn't long before I realized that he didn't speak much English, and he could tell that I wasn't so good at Spanish either. He then picked up a stick and started drawing a tic-tac-toe board in the dirt. Now, that game is something we both knew how to play. He offered me the stick, and I took it. We played game after game after game, laughing and having a great time. It's amazing to me how much we could communicate without even talking. We didn't have to know the same language to understand each other. We just did. I saw God through that little boy. I saw him in our shared laughter and our concentrated silence. His love is what guided us, even when words couldn't. I think that we need the people we are reaching out to more than they need us. That little boy taught me how to enjoy the simplest things in life. He taught me that happiness can only be found in the people around you and not what you possess. He didn't know it, but I needed him. I needed him to show me that God was there in every conversation, spreading his love. After this trip, reaching out didn't seem so hard anymore. I was more willing to do it. I joined a community service club at the beginning of the year at school, but I quickly learned that the kids were more focused on putting it on their college applications than actually doing the service. This semester, I had discovered a new way to reach out. About 2 months ago, my friend had recommended that we go to PALS for lunch. PALS is a program where kids get to eat lunch and talk with kids in the special needs program. I agreed to go, not knowing that I would meet someone that I now consider one of my closest friends. His name is Kenny, and I eat lunch with him every day. At first, I thought that he needed me to keep him company or something, but again, I realized that I need him way more than he needs me. Going to PALS is the best part of my day. Every time I see him, it instantly puts a smile on my face. Again, God is there in my relationship with Kenny. He's there in all the laughing, dancing, and countless Uno games. God is there every second, shining his light. Someone very close to me once said, God is the essence of love, and that's something that has always stuck with me. His love flows when you reach out to people and build relationships with them. One of the most important relationships in my life is the one I have with Tatum. We've been friends since before we were even born, when our moms were both pregnant and best friends at Hudson. We've grown up together, and she's always been there for me. When we were younger, we had a sleepover at her house and decided in the morning that we were too tired to go to church. So we went out back and discovered tortillas littered all over the ground. Now, for other people, these tortillas may have looked like another chore, but to us, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We collected all the tortillas and began throwing them off her porch like frisbees. And not only did we throw them, but we shouted Bible verses every time we threw one. This was Tatum's mom's idea of making up for missing church. This is why I love being friends with Tatum. We can be silly and crazy, but when we need to get serious and listen to each other, we can. She's more than a friend, she's my sister, and I don't know what I would do without her. She has been a big part in strengthening my faith in God and making me realize how loving he is. See, reaching out doesn't just mean community service, it means being there for someone when they need you most. Being there to just listen. God is there too, listening. His love is what connects us, what makes us whole. God is the essence of love, and it's our job to help spread it.
Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tatum. My mom is Nancy, and my grandparents are Carvel and Myrna. So when I began going to youth group in 6th grade, it was a really rocky time in my life, and there was a lot going on. We had just moved houses, and I was starting middle school, and I was discovering that I have an anxiety disorder. I felt sick constantly, and I became practically afraid to leave the house. I even missed one of the first days of 6th grade because I couldn't bring myself to leave the safety of the freshly warmed up comforter. It definitely caused me to question my faith because I could not understand why I was being plagued by this disorder. Why did God give me such an awful thing to put up with at such a turbulent time in my life? Had I done something to deserve this? I was having a hard time finding relief from the constant anxiety that I felt, and I felt like God had turned his back on me. Up until this point, I had rarely attended Sunday school, and I just sort of saw it as less time to sleep in on Sundays. I can barely remember how I was convinced to go to youth group, but I have reason to believe my mom and Gabby's mom made like a pact to force us to go be social, which is the last thing that you want to do when you have anxiety. But it turned out to sort of be a blessing in disguise because it became a place for me to practice talking with people without constantly analyzing what I was saying or how I was being perceived. This became a place where I could feel relaxed and comfortable with myself. And that took off some of the burden of the anxiety that I had being a tween going through a really awkward growing phase. So flash forward a few months, I just finished 6th grade and we're getting ready to go to Massanetta Springs for the first time. And for those of you who don't know, it's a 4-day youth conference in the mountains of Virginia. That theme this year was the Eye of the Storm, and I still have the t-shirt, even though it barely fits me anymore. So one evening we were in worship and the whole message was about how you may be personally battling a metaphorical storm, and that God was right there with you in the eye of the storm, and that God was the calming constant that steadied the waves in your life. And I was just so overwhelmed by that image that I started having a panic attack right there in the sanctuary. And because I couldn't conceptualize or comprehend the depth of love that God had for me. And I remember being so jolted that I had to borrow Mama B's phone to call my mom and talk about it. And I'm not really sure if it was the change in location or the people that I was with, but it was the first time that I had made a direct personal connection with the message. By the end of the week of laughing, singing, and doing energizers, I had made new friends. We had convinced the entire camp that we were from Alaska. And I had my first personal encounter with God. On the last night, we had a Vesper service. We sang Down to the River to Pray, which is now one of my favorite songs, and we'll be hearing it in a few minutes. And we processed out onto the front lawn, and it was encircled with lanterns, and we were each given a small pebble. This pebble. And it was supposed to represent all the sins that we had in our life. And our small group leaders took them from us, put them in a bowl of water, and metaphorically washed away all of our sins, and they gave it back to us to take with us as a memento of our time there. And so after the service, I went down to the springs, and they have like a natural springs, and that's why it's called Massanetta Springs. And so I put my feet in that freezing water, and I just started to cry. I couldn't stop. I had felt this overwhelming rush of relief that I felt like God had reached down to me in my storm and said, "It's going to be all right. It'll calm down." I never would have thought that in 6th grade I'd get up the nerve to stand up here and speak in front of the congregation, and frankly, I still can't believe that I'm doing this. I also never would have guessed that I'd leave the country to go on a mission trip, or that I'd find a whole entire extended family in the youth here. Even though that I've known Gabby my entire life, I never would have guessed that she'd become my best friend and the sister that I never had. She's been right here with me for this entire faith journey and the journey in finding myself. These people reached out to me in my time of need and brought me into this group and made me feel less alone in my storm. They didn't just tell me to pray for it to go away, instead they just took me in. I was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to go to Costa Rica and Montreat, and I owe it to you guys for fundraising and pitching in to send me to those places to further my faith, and I'm sure that I wouldn't have been able to do it without your support. I know for sure I wouldn't be the same person today if I had not been given these opportunities. What I have taken away from these experiences has given me a new way of seeing my faith. I see God as love and compassion. As we sang earlier, they'll know we're real Christians by our love. I believe that in the same, because we love, not because we love because we are Christians, but we are Christians because of our love. So much like God calling out to the disciples in the storm and assuring them to not be afraid, I believe it is our responsibility to reach out to those who are in a storm and show them some light and compassion. I'm not saying to go out and evangelize and to say to them, God has a plan, or let God take care of it, because those may just be words to people who don't believe in God. What I suggest is that we extend a hand out of compassion and love for one another, to do something that actually helps someone's situation, just as y'all have already done for me.
My name's Lily James. My parents are Angela Baker James and John James. Hey, you guys. And I've been going to Hudson as long as I can remember. So Reach to Preach to me, as I'm sure it means to everyone in the youth group and everyone here, it means service. And it's an integral part of our church's mission, and it's a really impactful way for me to feel like I'm giving back to a community that services me every day. So, of course, service doesn't have to be in our own communities. We traveled to New Orleans and Miami and Boston and Washington, D.C. and Costa Rica. And we were committed to the Harmony Ministry in Haiti, to the Frontero de Cristo Ministry on the U.S.-Mexico border, and to the Malanga Cox School in South Sudan. Here at Hudson, we travel thousands of miles to lend a helping hand where it's needed. Last summer, when the Hudson Youth Group went to Costa Rica, I unfortunately had to stay home. I saw pictures and spoke on the phone with all my friends who were building houses and teaching English and building relationships with those they were helping and with each other. I was obviously disappointed I had to stay home, but I don't regret the service work that I did locally instead. I work with a nonprofit called Girls Rock North Carolina. Their mission is to empower girls and young people of marginalized genders to play music and engage with the community. There, I organize summer camps, and I do after-school programs and workshops and fundraisers and events, and I've been doing all that since around 2014. However, Girls Rock North Carolina has been a large part of my life since I was 11. It's where I went to summer camp, And it's where I yelled into microphones and banged on drums. And it's where I learned that I could stand up and be bold and be seen. I probably couldn't give this message to you all if it weren't for the confidence I gained from Girls Rock. So it's that same confidence that I developed, that I saw developing in the young folks I was helping. Fostering the same esteem in others that I got years before was powerful beyond words. So when the youth group got back from Costa Rica, we all got to exchange stories about the service we had done and about what we had learned and about where we saw God. Anytime you spread the Lord's work outside of these church walls, you reach to preach. Whether it's in another state or another country or down the road, every single one of us has the power and the duty to reach out and help.
My name is Nikki Melling, and just some background about me. I'm a senior at Sanderson High School, and I will be attending Auburn University in the fall. My parents are Karen and Rick Melling, and I've also been coming to Hudson since I was born. So last summer, the youth group here at Hudson took a mission trip to Costa Rica, and when it comes to our theme today, Reach to Preach, I thought that would be appropriate. For those of you who have been on mission trips before, pretty much know how it works, but for those of you who have not, let me just take you through the wild trip that we endured. All 26 of us met at the airport early morning on June 18th, passports in hand. None of us realized that we would be put through hours of labor, building giant walls made of dirt-filled tires and houses, teaching at the local school, walking through neighborhoods of people who had nothing but walls made of steel sheets keeping them safe, and most importantly, creating unforgettable relationships with the kindest, happiest people on earth. One of those peoples was Rosa, an insanely strong woman who built half the tire wall that I mentioned on her own. Although she was physically strong, her mentality and heart is what blew me away. One day, about an hour through filling the tire wall, dark clouds rolled in and it started to pour. Rosa offered her house to us and we sat in her kitchen waiting for the storm to pass. It didn't. She offered to wash our clothes and make us food, but we politely declined her offer and just sat. It continued to rain throughout the day and we ended up leaving only to return the next morning. When we did, the dirt and clay we had been working with was now mud, thick enough to cover your entire shoe. When the workday was finally over, Rosa met us at the top of the hill in front of her house with a sponge and hose. She told us to all get in line, and one by one, she scrubbed our feet, relieving our shoes from the mud. This reminded me of a similar story from the Bible that we all probably know. I mean, the one where Jesus goes around and washes each of his disciples' feet. This experience was one that stuck out to me, one that I remember above all of the other experiences because of how humbling and spiritual it was. Rosa cannot say that she has all of the material things that we do. And on top of that, she takes care of her 11-year-old granddaughter, born from her daughter who didn't necessarily expect to have a child. With that said, I've never met someone happier than Rosa or her lively granddaughter, Rachel. We were there to help her, but she is the one that made such a massive impact on me. So going back to our theme, Reach to Preach, it's pretty obvious how we reached out to another country and helped them while sharing God's love. But what isn't so obvious was how the people in that trip would impact us. Reaching to preach isn't just about searching for those in need and sharing God's word, although that is a huge part. It's also about opening our hearts and minds and letting God impact us wherever we may be, like looking for God in the little things that we do. We were in Costa Rica to help people like Rosa, but she is the one who showed me God's love in a way that only she knew how, which was serving us while we were serving her.